You're listening to Systemic Error Podcast. The failure was designed.
Judge humiliates Trump's DOJ in key legal case, based on an article by Matthew Rosser. Subpoena theater for Autocrats, a leak hunt disguised as war. The reporting described here is simple enough. The Trump side tried to force the New York Times to reveal sources tied to reporting on the Qatari-gifted jet. The Times moved to quash the subpoenas, and Judge Arun Subramanian made the government defend a position it could not really defend. The Justice Department's lawyer, Buckley, ended up conceding the government could not meet the standard it needed to pierce reporters' privilege. That is the story. The rest is institutional smoke. Who actually holds power? The power in this case sits with the executive branch, not with the reporters, and not with the judge pretending to referee a clean legal question. Trump's people initiated the subpoenas. The Justice Department carried them. That means state power was being used to pry into a newsroom's confidential sources because the administration did not like what the reporting exposed. This is not a neutral legal disagreement. It is the government deploying compulsory process against the press, then asking for procedural breathing room when its own filing cannot survive scrutiny. The weakest defense in the room. Buckley's position, as described in the report, was not that the government had met the New York Times v. Gonzales standard. It was that the subpoena should merely be put on ice while investigators tried to build a better case later. That is not serious lawyering. It is an admission that the subpoenas were premature at best and punitive at worst. Judge Subramanian cut straight through it by asking whether the government would just withdraw them. The answer was no. Then the judge pressed again until the government conceded it could not satisfy the standard it had invoked. The point matters that the legal threshold exists for a reason. When the state wants access to confidential sources, it has to show that the information cannot be obtained elsewhere. Here, the government appears to have come in without that showing and then tried to improvise around the gap. Bad faith is the story. The Times argued the subpoenas were issued in bad faith to harass and intimidate journalists. Nothing in this report disproves that. In fact, the government's conduct makes the accusation look plausible. When prosecutors do not withdraw a defective subpoena, but instead ask for a pause so they can go fishing for a justification, they are not behaving like neutral truth seekers. They are behaving like officials who understand the legal weakness of their own case and want the coercive pressure to remain in place anyway. That is the logic of state intimidation. It keeps the threat alive, delay accountability, and hope the target blinks before the cop does. Press freedom is not the casualty. It is the target. This should not be flattened into a generic First Amendment concern. It is more direct than that. The government is trying to identify confidential sources connected to reporting that apparently embarrassed Trump over a foreign-gifted jet. The objective is obvious enough to punish disclosure, chill future leaks, and warn every source watching that speaking to journalists can bring the state to your door. That is how authoritarian systems train institutions to obey without issuing a formal ban. They do not need to outlaw the press when they can make source protection expensive, exhausting, and legally hazardous. The pattern beneath the case, the larger pattern, is not confusion. It is retaliation with paperwork. Trump world keeps treating the machinery of government as personal enforcement, a tool for narrowing the information available to the public and raising the cost of telling the truth. The Justice Department, in this account, did not act like an institution committed to narrow tailoring and constitutional restraint. It acted like a pressure arm for a political operation that wanted the reporting itself subdued. That is the real lesson here. Democratic institutions do not fail only when they collapse. They fail when officials use their authority to harass the people who expose them, then pretend the coercion is merely procedural. You've been listening to Systemic Error. Thanks to Alternate for today's article. With the automated voice of John, thanks for listening.